Hey guys, welcome to the Fancy Footy Floodbath, and we're on to the next 6 teams. Just doing a bit of a preview for before the AFL Fantasy preseason for 2023 begins. In the first video, we did a look at the first 6 teams in alphabetical order, and you can check that one out on my channel. Adelaide, Brisbane, Carlton, Collingwood, Essendon and Fremantle, but today we'll be doing the next 6 in alphabetical order, which is Geelong, Gold Coast, GWS, Hawthorn, Melbourne, and finishing with North Melbourne. So let's kick things right off with the reigning premiers, Geelong. Now, if you look down Geelong's list, there's probably not a lot to write home about in terms of fantasy guys that we need to be aware of in 2023. I've picked out 4 main guys that I think could be in the mix. Cameron Guthrie is one that I think it's 750k. So obviously, Cameron Guthrie, 750k. We talked about in the last video how there's going to be an increase in price with the salary cap increase, and that for every 100,000k a player costs, they will probably go up about 5,000. So for someone 750k, that means Guthrie would go up about 37 to 40,000. So it'd probably be about 790,000 in the new groupings in 2023. That would be a really good price. My only concern with Cameron Guthrie is that he has shown to be quite a good player in terms of scoring, but he's not really he doesn't really have a high ceiling, doesn't really get to the 130s and the 140s very much. However, with Joel Selwood now retired, he might be the main guy in there, and but they still have a lot of depth in their midfield. Obviously, they have a lot of depth in their midfield, otherwise they wouldn't have won the premiership. So I still think Guthrie's not going to be a huge spiker. He's not going to have big ceilings. So that's the only... I mean, if you want someone who is value, who will probably be consistent, then Guthrie's a pretty good pick. But in terms of going big with his scores, then probably that's not going to happen very much. But still, not a bad value pick. People have talked to me about Mitch Duncan, but I think Mitch Duncan already showed in 2022 that he is a little bit injury prone. 782 he finished the year on, so that means he's going to be in the early 800s. Probably not, I would say. I would say steer clear of him. For him to play a whole season or to be there at the business end when you want him to be might be a little bit difficult for Duncan. One of the other 4 that I picked out was Blitzarves. 703 he finished at. If he's still a ruck defender in terms of his positioning, then Blitzarves is a value pick, especially after what he did. He seems to be going from strength to strength. He's got a huge tank. He's a Mr. Fix-It kind of guy, so he can play in lots of different positions. So that lends itself to getting a lot of the ball. Had a massive final series in 2022, so he finished the year really, really well. And I would think that he would continue to go from strength to strength with his fitness base and his ability to find the football. And more his teammates seem to be relying on him. So Blitzarves is a bit of a left field one to keep an eye out for. He's probably only going to be somewhere in the region of 740 as well. After finishing the year 703. So keep an eye on Blitzarves. Tom Stewart finished the year well down. He's another one of those 4 that I picked out. Tom Stewart is finished the year at just 702k. That's well below what he started the year at. He started the year well over 800, I think it was. So 702, which will probably convert into about 740, is quite a bargain. And he might be a stalwart down in defence. And we know how much he can get the ball and how much they use him. And also how much he runs through kind of the wings and the middle to get the footy. So always a good option. Zach Tui's an interesting one. Had a great final series. will finish the year at 688. So he's not a bad option either. Has never been a huge scorer in fantasy, but he finished the year so well that I would be giving him some consideration when the season turns out. Isaac Smith, no. I think he's getting to the back end, and it's going to be hard for these guys who've been working their guts out over 30 to get a premiership, like the Zach Tui's, the Tom Hawkins, the Isaac Smiths, the Tom Hawkins, these sort of guys, Mitch Duncan. It's going to be hard for them to back up and go at the same level after winning a premiership. They've realised their dream. They've got that premiership they wanted. And now to be able to go to a next level is going to be difficult for those guys, especially in a fantasy way. So, and they're probably, the other thing with Chris Scott is that he's shown a propensity to actually rest players, and the older guys are going to get a rest during the year, and that can play havoc with your fantasy side. So Isaac Smith's a no, Cameron's a no. Even Tom Atkins might be a bit overpriced now with him finishing at 633. Segler's an interesting one at 609. If he becomes number one ruck guy, then maybe that could be a real value pick. And if they show early in the preseason and early in the season that he's their number one ruck man, then he could be an interesting pick. Dangerfield's another one in that category of over 30, wanting to get that premiership, got it now, and it will be hard to go again in a bigger way. And I think Dangerfield's also showed that he's probably on the way down in terms of his output. Still a very good player, but just not really at the level of fantasy we need to put him in our teams. Max Holmes at 590 might have got to a place where he's overpriced. The last one of that group of four that I thought might be an interesting pick is Zach Guthrie. I started with Zach Guthrie at the beginning of 2022, and he's finished the season really, really well in the finals and the end of the home and away, and still only priced at 514. So about the same price as what he started 2022, and could be a real bargain and could finish the season as a really good defender. So as a mid-price option and a value option, I'd be keeping an eye on Zach Guthrie, who seemed to be getting a lot more responsibility down back towards the end of the year. And he has shown an ability to really get the football and be relied on a lot by teammates. So at 514, which will probably go up to somewhere around the 540 mark, I think Zach Guthrie could be one of the picks of the season, and so we should be keeping an eye on him. People have asked me about the recruits, Jack Bowes, Ollie Henry and Tanner Bruin. I wouldn't think so with those three guys just yet, unless you see a real breakout in terms of position. Like if Bowes gets starting to be thrown in the middle and has a lot of centre bounce time and CBAs, then Jack Bowes could be an option, but he's still heavily priced. Tanner Bruin, who is lowly priced, but hasn't shown that he can get a huge amount of the ball consistently yet. And we'll find it difficult in a great team like Geelong to do that. So he's a bit of a cross for now. And Ollie Henry, well, a tall forward there. So I would say that's a no for him as well. And that's probably it for Geelong. Those four main guys, Guthrie, Blicavs, Stewart, and Zach Guthrie, are probably my four picks to keep an eye on for the Cats in 2023. Okay, so let's start with the Gold Coast Suns. We begin at the top with the most expensive player, which is Tuke Miller at 903. He will go up to about 950, so quite an expensive start for Tuke. And one thing we learnt with 2022 is that he started a little bit slow before he kicked into gear, but still a very reliable player, still a very reliable scorer, and he's someone to definitely keep in mind for 2023. You can't go wrong much with Tuke Miller. Miller is a very good player and a very good fantasy scorer, so he will be a good pick. The next in line is Noah Anderson, of course, who was also about 100,000 cheaper, and all reports already, Anderson is really stepping up his game. He came second in their time trial, and he could go to another level next year. Mind you, he had a career best year in 2022, and as I always say, it's very hard for players who have a career best year to actually go better the following year. So just be aware of that. But at 100,000 cheaper than Miller, and a lot of weeks he actually outscored or came pretty close to scoring the same as Miller. So at 100,000 cheaper, he could be a pretty good value pick. Let's go down the list. I would say Witts is maxed out in price. It's $751 now. David Swallow, $743, finished the year well. Has probably finished a little bit overpriced. Lockie Weller will come back from that injury at $605, but as they always say with a knee injury like a reconstruction, it takes a good 12 months for those guys to get back to their normal output. So Lockie Weller is one that I would just avoid for 2023. Matt Rowell's an interesting one. He'd be on the never again list for many, many people, I have no doubt. $568. Finished the season not much more expensive than the way he started. So in terms of that, a lot of people will be looking at him again. I don't know if Rowell can get back to the heights that he had early on in his career. I think they've changed his role pretty dramatically, and it can be pretty dramatically different from week to week. I think they're trying to teach him how to tag. They're trying to teach him about all the aspects of being a elite midfielder. Once they unleash him away from all of that and into being just a ball getter, which will happen at some point, then he's going to be more fantasy relevant. But while they're experimenting with him as a this and that kind of utility player, then that's probably a no. And gee, a lot of people got burnt in 2022 picking him, didn't they? Lukosius is a really interesting one for me. $535 is a very low price from a guy who's as talented as him. Was a defender mid. Will probably get forward as a forward this 2023, and I think Lukosius is one to watch. Let's watch for his role. Let's watch for where he's going to be playing and then make a judgment. But that is a value price at $535, and I would be keeping a strong eye on him. Elijah Hollands probably is one that we got a little bit annoyed that he played so many games at the end of the year there, as everyone was on board with him early in the year and didn't get his games until late and finished at $448. So he might be into that mid-price level now that's a little bit difficult to pick him. So probably a no for Elijah Hollands. Going down the list, the other one that I've got an eye on is Tom Berry, who's come in from Brisbane. Didn't get many games there. He finished the season at 286. He's come over to Gold Coast. Obviously, they've seen something they like there, so they've brought him over. And just keep an eye on him. I think that Tom Berry could be an option at 286 and one of those rookie guys, if he starts getting games early on, that we might like to have. Jeremy Sharp's another one. His price dropped really dramatically as his scoring wasn't great when he did play. But the year before, in his rookie year, he was amazing. He's priced at $388, so that'll go up to around the $410, $420. And he might still be a really good value pick, especially if he starts getting games out on that wing again like he did a couple of years ago. Alex Davies at $350 looks like he's ready to explode and have a breakout year at some point. Maybe it'll be 2023. He's still only priced at $350. Has shown that he can get the ball a lot. So keep an eye on him. Ben Long, coming from St Kilda, finished at $516. Had a couple of games towards the end of the season where he scored really, really big. So his transference to Gold Coast might mean that he's a big ball getter for Gold Coast in 2023. But at $516, it's that mid-price madness. Keep an eye on him. And the last one that I wanted to mention was James, I forget, Zitas or Cetus, or I forget the way they pronounce it. But he was on the radar all year, had a game or two. I think he only played one actually, and was played predominantly forward. But this guy originally was an elite centre bounce ball getter in the middle, And if he is given a go in there on a more permanent basis, then 190k, he will be a great overall pick and a good rookie pick for our sides. So just see what they do with him. Keep an eye on him. Keep him on your watch list. And James Sitas, spelt Tsita. Okay, so GWS. The first one is Canelio, who finished the year at the highest price of $8.29, but I wouldn't think that Canelio could reproduce as good, and he certainly dropped off in the second half of the year, so I'd be steering clear of him in terms of value picks. The next one, though, is a value pick, and that's Josh Kelly. Had the drop off in the second half of the year because of a bit of injury and maybe a little bit of form as well. 783, so he's going to go up to about 820, which will be a good 100,000 or 200,000 cheaper than some of the top echelon players. So keep your eye on Josh Kelly, and probably a good player to start with, although what we did find in 2022 was he was a bit slow to start. But I would imagine that would have been on his mind, that he started slow. I'll talk more about this in my video about teams with new coaches and where I expect teams to finish in 2023. But I think GWS are going to come out pretty hard at the start of next year, and Kelly could be the driver of that, especially with no Taranto there now. No Jacob Hopper there now. I think Kelly could be back to the main guy. Callum Ward's going to be a bit older, and I think that some other guys are going to have to step in to the breach, and I think Kelly could be a real outlet player for GWS in 2023. But it's a watch because we don't know what Adam Kingsley, the new coach, is going to do with him. We could have a different role for him. But that'll be an interesting player to see. Lockie Whitfield's the other one who might be a real value pick, 730. He produced much lower than we expected in 2022, so he's due to come back to his normal self, and with a new coach giving him the chance to be unleashed. And some of those, he had a few niggling injuries in 2022 that were holding him back. So if his body is completely fresh and he's able to completely run at the capacity that he wants, then we could see Lockie Whitfield bring in some big numbers again in 2023. And priced at only 730, which will go up to 770-ish, that's still a really, really good price for him. Isaac Cumming, 689. I think Isaac Cumming still is going to be proven to be the main guy down back. What they do with Himmelberg is really an interesting watch. Now, if Himmelberg stays down back, then maybe Cumming is not the guy you want because they've tended to play through Himmelberg a fair bit. I still wouldn't be picking Himmelberg for 2023 fantasy, as I think he might have maxed out in price. But if Himmelberg plays elsewhere away from the defensive line, then Cumming could be a good bargain. We'll start at about 720k, I reckon. So keep an eye on him. Harry Perryman, 672. Might tend to get a lot more midfield time now that Hopper and Taranto are gone. So keep an eye on him too. Perryman will start about 700, and that's a bargain if he gets the midfield time that we're hoping for. The other one around the midfield who could be a beneficiary of Hopper and Taranto leaving is Tom Green. Started the year like a house on fire in 2022, but tended to drop off as the year went on. If he gets a good look at it in the middle again at 579, he's going to be a huge, huge value pick. So don't be surprised if Tom Green really blows it apart early on, especially in 2023. So keep a strong eye on him. Braden Pruce at 629, if he can get his body right, get some continuity with his game time at 629. And if he proves to be the number one ruck, obviously that's going to be difficult with Flynn having another pre-season under his belt. And I think they've got Flynn earmarked for that main number one ruck spot. So I wouldn't be getting too carried away from Pruce, but he's a watch as well, especially with a new coach. And the other one I wanted to mention was Lockie Ash, 496. Had a great year in 2021. Didn't quite get those fantasy heights again last year or last season in 2022. But watch for what the coach does with him. As if he turns out to be a running halfback, they use Whitfield more in the midfield, then both those guys, Ash and Whitfield, could be really good picks for our fantasy teams. Just going down the list, there's not a lot else with GWS. Maybe Finn Callahan, if he can get some continuity, get lots of game time. We'll start the year around the 400 mark, bit over that. Maybe Likalia, 319. He's a bit above rookie price now, though, because he had some games at the end of 2022. And the other one I was thinking of was Ryan Angwin, who's been a really good player in their VFL team for a couple of years. He's still 190k, so he's still rookie priced. Will be around the 200. We've heard the rookies are going to go up to around the 200, 210 mark. So he'll still be about that price. So if he starts getting a look in their side, then he'll be one to start with and could be a good option for our fantasy sides in 2023. Let's move on to the Hawks. Okay, we move on to Hawthorn. And obviously Tom Mitchell's gone now, so the big question is, who is going to be the ball getter? Who is going to be the main guy? Of course, O'Meara's gone too. And what we saw in 2022 is the main guy seemed to be Joe Newcomb. Now, whether Newcomb can go to another level and produce really strong fantasy relevant numbers will be an interesting watch. I think Darcy Moore is another one. Dylan Moore? My mistake. Darcy Moore's at Collingwood. Dylan Moore's the other one who had a great season. But Sicily is one I've got my eye on. Finished the year at 764. Had that unbelievable 150 odd in the round 23 game that helped a lot of teams win premierships against the Bulldogs. And at 764, finishing the year, he's going to be somewhere around the 800 mark. He might be a really good bargain pick for next year. Now, we've got the same coach in Sam Mitchell, so we know that the way they played Sicily is probably the way they're going to play him in 2023. So nothing to worry about there in terms of change. You wouldn't think that Sicily's game would be altered too much because he's too effective the way he plays. And they're certainly going to have a lot of ball in their defensive half. You would think the Hawks in 2023, the way they've cut their list, they've got a very, very young list now. And Sicily's almost a lock for me in already, just because, if he can stay fit, obviously, just because there's going to be a lot of ball down there and they play through him a lot as a bit of a security blanket. If they're under pressure, if they're in trouble, he's the guy they know is got space and can deliver the ball well, can kick the ball well, can kick the ball to a teammate, and they tend to use him as a bit of a get-out option. So I would be looking very closely at James Sicily even at this early stage. Newcomb at 721. Well, the question is, he's a value pick. If he gets as much as the ball as we think he's going to, then 721 is a bargain, which will probably go up to about the 750s. So Newcomb at that price seriously needs to be looked at as well, especially if he turns out to be the number one guy. But the other one that's kind of in the mix for the number one guy in the middle there is Josh Ward. He'll only be in his second season, and obviously most of us started with him in 2022 and watched as the second half of the year he started to move into the numbers that we saw him get as a junior. He's finished at 644, so if he's going to get similar output to Newcomb, he's about 80,000 cheaper. So Ward might be a better option as a value pick. And just seeing who the main guy is in there will be a really big watch for Hawthorn with trading O'Meara, trading Mitchell. We'll see how they go there. But the other one to watch is Warple. Warple is as low as 446, and you would expect that Warple, even though he's had a couple of down years, would come back to be one of the main prominent guys in the middle for the Hawks. So if that's the case, 446 is a huge bargain. But his consistency in terms of scoring fantasy-wise is a little bit questionable. So you might pick him at 446, but don't be surprised if he punches out a 40 or 50 quite often. And they've got no Liam Shields there now either, which is another one which will make the younger guys get a lot more of the football. But, gee, it's a little bit of a wait and see with Hawthorn, but at least we know what's going to happen in terms of the coaches the same as 2022, which was Mitchell. So we know we've already seen a blueprint of what he wants to do and who he wants to put in there, which is a lot of the young guys. So it's just a matter of seeing what their output is and how much they increase in the ball. Cooper Stevens, coming from Geelong, one of their recruits, is one that I would think would be prominent. He finished the year at 334. Still reasonably rookie priced, maybe just a bit above that, but not more expensive enough to be called a mid-price player. So depending on how much game time Cooper Stevens get, he could be a good option at that price. Lockie Bramble, who had an main injury in 2022, kept him out of the main team for a lot of the season, is priced at 490, but he was a huge ball getter the year before, and at only 490, he could be a really good bargain pick, Lockie Bramble, this year. Finn McGuinness, if they take the reins off him and stop him being the tagger and unleash him in the midfield, which is usually the plans of coaches. They usually teach them to be a tagger first, and then they unleash them as just a standalone ball getter in the middle. And he could be a really good pickup at only 490 and 480, sorry, and his price will go up to 500-ish. But at a mid price, he could be a standout as well. Lloyd Meek, if he turns out to be their number one ruckman at only 450, which will go up to 470, 480, that's a bargain. And if he's the main guy getting 70s or 80s every week, then the 450 will be a really good pick for Lloyd Meek at that price. Connor Downey, who didn't get much game time in 2022, is only 220. Ned Long, 211. Two guys that haven't really got much of a chance yet, but are a rookie price to keep an eye on. Will Day, who suffered with injuries in 2022 at 456. I'd be keeping an eye on Will Day. Keeping an eye on Scrimshaw as well, who had a good year with 611, and he could turn out to be one of the main guys down back this year. And the last one I wanted to talk about is a guy called Fergus Green, who was on the Bulldogs list some years ago and looked pretty good on the Bulldogs list. Turned out to be a goal kicker in the Hawthorn VFL, Box Hill VFL this year, and kicked a lot of goals and looked really good from the vision that I watched when I saw him play. He's been put onto their main list. Obviously, he played pretty well because he's been put onto their main list. And I would think that Fergus Green will get plenty of games for the Hawks and could be a handy rookie price, as I would imagine he'll be a pretty low price. So keep an eye on him too. And so that's it for the Hawks. Okay, so Melbourne, and at the top, of course, is Clayton Oliver, 886, probably starts the year around the 930 mark. Now, Clayton Oliver's a really interesting one. Played so well in 2022 and 21. He's a really reliable guy to start with. If you're in a league and you want to just win the league, you're not interested in, doing that well with rankings, you're more interested in just winning your league, then I would actually recommend that you start with Clayton Oliver because he's so reliable and he can do so well early on in seasons and in games and score big. And I think that he and the Melbourne Football Club as a whole will come out swinging. The way they finished in 2022 means that they're going to be pretty desperate to re-establish themselves early in 2023, and Oliver could be leading that charge. So I would be starting with Oliver as a guy who's wanting to win my league, but I wouldn't be starting with him if you're looking at big rankings. If you're looking at big rankings and it's all about value, it's all about getting the players that are value, And I wouldn't think that Oliver in the 900s is going to be a value pick, but he's certainly going to be a good solid pick in terms of scoring and getting you points early on to beat people in your league. So just keep an eye on him for that. Max Gawn is a massively interesting one now that Brodie Grundy has entered the fray. What is going to happen with Max? Obviously, he's going to spend a lot more time forward. Now, we know he can kick goals. We know he can play forward. But the thing that people seem to have forgotten about is that he can also play back and he can also go back. And if he's a guy taking marks in the defensive 50, then he could continue to score really, really well. Obviously, he's still going to spend maybe half the time or, a fair bit of time in the rucks. So you wouldn't imagine his scoring is going to drop off that much. But in terms of value, once again, I don't know if he's going to be about 880, 890. So I'm not sure if he's going to be a value pick to start the year, but he certainly will be a solid pick. Brodie Grundy will be about the 850, 840 mark. And he's a real watch how he comes back from that injury, how much ruck time he spends, how much time he spends in the forward line, and we need to keep an eye on what Simon Goodwin is going to do with him there. I would be staying away from Angus Brayshaw. I think that he's about 825, which will convert into about 850, 860. He might have maxed out in price. I would imagine that Brayshaw will come down a lot in price. Probably had one of his best seasons, and in terms of positioning for fantasy, had one of his best seasons. Was a real ball getter and a real option for his teammates. So I don't know if he'll start the season as cracking as what he finished 2022. Petrarca 796. Well, we saw with Petrarca some great scores in terms of ceilings. He had a couple of 130s, 140s. But then he also had some absolute shockers, including that 40 in about round 10, I think it was. So Petrarca is an interesting one for me. They tended to play him a lot more forward. Are they going to keep doing that? And if they do keep doing that, I'm not sure that I want to go near him. Salem is an interesting one, 614. He obviously came down a fair bit in price. He's a watch, how fit he is, where they play him down back, how much of an outlet guy he is this year. If he is the same sort of outlet guy he was 2 years ago, then definitely an option. But whether that's the case or not, we'll see. But Salem is certainly bargain priced at 614. Lockie Hunter's going to come into that side at about 611. If he turns out to be a big ball getter and is let off the chain like he had been in some seasons there at the Bulldogs, then 611 is going to be a bargain for him. So keep an eye on him too. Ed Langdon dropped off a fair bit with 536. Had a couple of really big scoring games, but had a couple of shockers as well. How much they use him, 536 is his price, so he's going to be somewhere around the 570s. It's a bit of that mid-price madness. But I would be thinking that Langdon is maybe at an age now where his scoring is going to just slightly drop off year by year. So I'd be staying away from him. Some of the lower price guys, Trent Rivers is an interesting one. I think Rivers has dropped to 359, and I wouldn't be surprised if he starts getting more midfield time, and that's a guy that I would be keeping an eye on, who many people might not be looking at. He's not quite high priced enough to be mid-price, and he's just above the rookie price. So Rivers is a really interesting one I'd be looking at very closely, depending on his fitness. Another preseason behind him, but he's going to be one of their prime movers in the years to come as some of these other guys get older, but it may not be just yet in 2023. So let's keep him on the watch list. Kyle Chandler and Taj Woden are still rookie priced at the 190, which will go up to about 200, 210. So keep an eye on them for game time. They might get more of a look in 2023, and they are rookie price, so are good options. Let's move on to North Melbourne. Okay, so the last team we're going to do today is the Kangaroos, obviously with a new coach there, Alistair Clarkson. across the board, it's a real watch and see what is Clarkson going to do with these players. As a football fan in general, I'm a Sydney Swans fan, but I am absolutely fascinated to see what all of these new coaches, Brad Scott with Essendon, Ross Lyon with St Kilda, Adam Kingsley with GWS, what are these new coaches going to do with these players and where are they going to play them? Well, don't be surprised if some guys are locked into a position in the first 4, 5, 6 weeks and then all of a sudden they're thrown out as their game plan evolves, the way they want to do things with the team changes. But North Melbourne are an absolutely fascinating watch. Luke Davies-Uniacke is at the top of the tree in terms of fantasy scoring, 838k. Once again, I don't think he's going to be a value pick, but he's going to definitely be the mainstay and the main guy in there. We thought in 2021 that the main guy was going to be Simpkin, but Simpkin dropped off quite significantly in 2022, and it looked like Davies-Uniacke was going to be the guy. But who is going to be the main guy according to Clarkson? That is the interesting question. Is Davies-Uniacke going to start to get a lot more attention, and then Simpkin can get off the chain? Simpkin finished the year really well, which we all expected because he had such a kind of difficult first half of the year. But is it going to be enough to be worthy of our fantasy teams? Simpkin is 817, so he'll go up around the 850 mark. I don't know with Simpkin. It's a really interesting one, and it's one to keep an eye on. Cunnington I'd be saying no to, just because I think he's at the back end of his career. He definitely will be a good extractor from the centre bounces and from the CBAs. But I don't know if he's going to get to the numbers that we want him to get to. And if they are relying on him heavily and he is getting big numbers, then it's probably a bad sign for North Melbourne because they need some of these other guys to start stepping up and being more prominent in their midfield and as ball getters. So Aaron Hall is an interesting watch too. He dropped 200k after starting the season 2022 around the 910 mark, dropped to 714, will probably be around the 750, 760 mark. But I'd still be saying no. I think those hamstrings are pretty suspect now. He's getting to an age where his body's starting to break down more consistently, and I think I would be putting him on the back burner. The guy who seems to be just continually putting up decent numbers every year, no matter how old he gets, is Goldstein. He's finished the year at 620, and while he's not going to be, your 120, 130 guy in the ruck, he's pretty good for the 70s and the 80s. And at 620, which will go to about 650, maybe he's a good value pick. Maybe he's a good consistent pick, which will be about 250 cheaper than maybe a lot of those main ruck guys. And the scoring may not be that much less. So maybe only 20 points less than some of those guys. So Goldstein is a really interesting one at 620. And if you're looking at value and as a kind of hedging your bets, and let's see who the good ruckmen are first before we trade to them, rather than just trying to pick them from the beginning, then Goldstein is a chance. Bailey Scott, 546. May get more of a go with Clarkson, but that's a wait and see. Tristan Cherry, 509. If he becomes the main ruckman instead of Goldie there, then who knows. But Clarkson has shown in the past that he doesn't mind using the older guys as main guys. He's used Mitchell, he's used McAvoy. He traded in guys that were, late 20s into his side and wasn't afraid to do that to be main guys in the team. So he may not be afraid to use those main players. Moving on, Taron Thomas is a real watch at 463. Tom Powell at 451, who had a great year in 2021 but dropped off in 2022, second year blues. What they do with Taron Thomas, how fit he is, whether he's ready to go round one, they're all things to keep an eye on. What they do with Callum Coleman-Jones as a ruck, because they've got Cherry, they've got Goldstein, they've got CCJ there. Are they going to put Coleman-Jones in a more prominent ruck role? who knows? Josh Goder is one who, or Goter, I don't know how to pronounce that, finished the season with an 80 odd, I think it was, in round 23. So his price went up to 283, but he's still pretty much rookie priced, and will be one to keep an eye on, especially if he's all go for round 1. Charlie Comben, 201. There's another one of those ruckmen they've got on their list, which is a watch, and he's still rookie priced. Jacob Edwards, tall forward that was got in or recruited in the mid-season draft in 2021. Haven't really seen him yet as a player in the last year and a half. His numbers at VFL level are not that great, so he might be a no. But he's still rookie priced at 190, so he's one to keep an eye on if he gets game time. And the other two are Griffin Logue, who I would say no about coming over to North, but Darcy Tucker maybe 380, depending on his role. If he takes that Jared Pollock spot on the wing, then and in a permanent way, and starts to prove that he early on in the preseason looks really good and really fit, and running really hard, and is a good outlet option for them, then 380 will be a bargain, or he'll be about 410. So keep an eye on Darcy Tucker as well. Okay, so thanks for watching this video and listening to my rants about every team. That's the next 6 done. We'll be back with the next video in the next 2 weeks, which will be the last 6 teams: Port Adelaide, Richmond, St Kilda, Sydney Swans, West Coast and Western Bulldogs. So stay tuned for that. Please like and subscribe if this video has been to your liking. And remember that I'm bringing out a video in the next month or two, which will be about where teams will finish in 2023 and where I think that they will be strong and where I think they'll be weak, and what they can do and what to look out for with them in the coming season. So thanks a lot again, and I'll talk to you again soon on the Fancy Footy Floodbath. See you later, guys. Bye.